So what about timing? Because that's another important aspect. You mentioned, which is really important, I hope people caught that in the last few weeks before the HSC, you kind of weren't worrying about drafting and cutting things down. It basically sounded like you were ready to go a few weeks in advance, and then it was just a matter of remembering everything, because there is obviously a lot to remember when you're basically memorizing 3 to 4 big responses, if we're including craft of writing, which we'll touch on after. But yeah, what was the relevance of timing for you and doing practice write-outs and cutting things down? What were your objectives when you were doing that?
I would say that the whole timing thing I've learned like pretty much straight away from trials, because obviously for trials you have to have those essays. It is the HSC, but just within your school. And before trials, I was still memorizing like pretty much like the day. Like that was when I was like, okay, I didn't leave myself enough time to memorize. Like I was memorizing the day before, just hoping that like I was like, I really hope this is all in my head, because I feel like I haven't given myself enough time to memorize. And that was because I had only finished the drafting stage probably like the week or like maybe 5 days before my actual exam, or in some cases, like for maybe, I think, I can't remember which module, but for like maybe mod A, for example, maybe I hadn't like completely finished it until like 2 or 3 days before, which is really like quite scary. And I didn't like that I'd put myself in that position. But that meant I learned for the HSC that I needed at least like a week out, because obviously I edited my essays again after trials, but then I needed like at the very least a week out to have for like each module to have that memorization, like time for that memorization process. And like one of the big things I would say is to never underestimate how long it will take to memorize, because especially if it is using material that isn't yours, that if like maybe you've crafted an essay with a friend, or you found some stuff online, whatever it is, if it's not your own words, it's not going to go in your head, and you're not going to be able to write that and adapt that. So I would leave like ample time for memorization. And then when you adapt as well, the words will change on the page. You'll forget your progression. If you're trying to memorize like line by line, the second you have to change a little bit to adapt to a question, you'll be like, I've lost where I'm at, like where I am now. So I would say for me, at least, I needed at least a week to have that whole memorization process of like memorizing line by line, then adapting to different questions, and then being able to like fluently write out the whole essay.
Yeah, great. And more specifically on the timing of each essay, or even the craft of writing, how did you approach preparing for that? Because obviously, from a macro point of view, I think you covered that super well. But what about the micro point of view of an essay where you have 40 minutes to write it? Before you started memorizing, were you timing them out and cutting them down until you got to a certain point? And if you did do that, what kind of time were you happy with for each one that would allow enough of a buffer to adapt to new questions?
Oh, so within the actual exam, like the time management?
Yeah, time management in the exam. And how did you factor that in when you were preparing it? Because some people would say, oh, I'll just prepare a 1,000 word essay.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if you're a
Yeah.
slow writer, 1,000 words is going to take you an hour. So how did you go about that before you started committing to that essay? And you're like, I'm definitely going to try and write something like this.
Right. Yes. No, I see. I like what you're saying, like the biggest thing I picked up just when you said was that it does always take longer than you kind of estimate to write out, like whatever it is, 1,000 words. Like you can write 1,000 words if you're just completely writing it out, not changing to a question, but you do have to give time for that like adaptation. And from what I remember, all my essays for each module, actually like module A, B, and common mod, were all, I think some were like, they were all about 900 words. Some may even have been like 800 or maybe up to 1,000, but there wasn't like anything more than that. It wouldn't give you time to adapt. And like adaptation is not just changing a couple of words. Sometimes you're going to need to add quite a few more sentences. And I know for the 2021 HSC, from what I like remember of the mod A question, there was a big chunk of like, it was like the stimulus was like a lot of quotes, and you had to include a lot of those quotes in the introduction. So my introduction did take up to maybe a page or half a page, like quite a bit of the page. Whereas my prepared introduction was probably 4 or 5 sentences. So I would say I made sure I would prefer to be on the shorter side slightly than on the longer side. But I did have a long essay, like I had a 1,200 word essay that I would have, and then I cut that down to 800 or 900, and I'd use that one for the timed essays. But then if I did need to add a couple more details, I still knew that longer essay, that 1,200 word essay, I still knew those extra details that I could add in if I realized, oh, I actually do have a bit more time than I thought. This question wasn't too hard to adapt to. But it's ultimately kind of just having a bit of like a memory of that longer essay, but knowing like inside and out that shorter essay, because it's unlikely that you're going to get a question that just allows you to completely write your pre-prepared essay, I would say.